Chuta is a traditional leader in the village of Tilivalevu in the mountain ranges of Nandronga. He's known amongst government officials as the Mountain Chief. Chuta is among 2/3 of the world's population that depend on their natural resources to live. He and his people on Tilivalevu are also part of the world's land users who'll experience 3 different types of environment impacts. These are desertification, climate change and the loss of biodiversity, known collectively as the Rio Conventions. Desertification is addressed in the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, UNCCD. It's the degradation of land in arid, semi-arid and sub-dry humid areas.
When we sign or ratify a convention, we have specific obligations under that convention to carry out.
Ratifying conventions is one thing, keeping to the commitment is another. Most Pacific Island countries face many challenges when implementing requirements of instruments like the Rio Conventions. Fiji is no exception. The lack of resources continues to pose a major challenge, and capacity gaps have been identified to be affecting implementing processes.
It had been a very big challenge in the beginning, because we came in at a time when these various land ministries were mandated to utilize as much resources as possible, to generate income, generate economic activities for government. But here we are. We came in at a time when we wanted to ensure that these resources which they manage should be utilized in a sustainable manner.
Departments like the Fiji Meteorological Office are testimony to the need for resources. At the Climate Change Office, data is stored in a container because there are no funds to construct an archive to properly and securely store vital information, especially on climate change.
There's a huge amount of data that needs to be processed and archived. Our climate change database was donated to Fiji by the World Meteorological Organization in the mid-1990s. To be honest, it is well past its use-by date, and we urgently require replacement. The hard copy archive, we have outgrown our hard copy archives. We have those paper records because of the shortage of space in a shipping container, and that's not ideal.
The Climate Change Office isn't alone, as they face the same challenges as the Ministry of Agriculture's Land Use Division and the Ministry of Forestry, which are also the focal points for the Rio Conventions. In order for the conventions to work, the National Capacity Self-Assessment Project was established. The NCSA, as it's better known, is a capacity-building initiative to meeting environmental commitments.
The NCSA relates to finding out capacity gaps in the country as it relates to environmental management. That is linked to the fundamental principles of UNDP's work. The NCSA is funded by the Global Environment Facility, the GEF, as you may know, and it is one of the offspring of the Capacity Development Initiative that came out of the reviews that was undertaken in the year 2000.
So why is the NCSA concept so important to countries like Fiji?
NCSA will actually achieve capacity needs at the systemic and institutional as well as individual levels. It will mean working together as various line governments to actually ensure that the obligations under the 3 Rio Conventions are implemented effectively and efficiently at the ground level.
When the Department of Environment assessed on how Fiji was performing with regards to meeting its obligations under the CBD on biological diversity, climate change and on desertification, it was found that there were a total of 46 needs. Many of the needs were similar, reducing it to 9 cross-cutting issues. These were in policy and legislation, institutional networking, performance and reporting requirements, financial mechanisms, systematic research and monitoring, training and education, raising awareness, capacity building or institutional strengthening, and cross-cutting projects. To address these issues, a series of workshops were conducted in various parts of Fiji. One such workshop was held in Nadi in the western part of Fiji in 2009. It looked at the urgent need to address the social, economic and environmental concerns emanating from environment problems like desertification, climate change and the loss of biodiversity.
In other words, we need to identify how many consultations that needs to take place in order to achieve. The planning process needs to be detailed and clear.
Another consultation was held in Lambasa in the northern part of Fiji. At this workshop, consultants enlisted by the Department of Environment sought guidance from government officials. For these officials in the north, the lack of emphasis on the Rio Conventions is because there isn't an officer from the Department of Environment in the north to drive home the importance of the environment. While officials and experts are contemplating the way forward, farmers like Chuta are thinking about their next crop, the next season and what to do.
November. Ngilang mainan December, January, ya mesa ambula rawatu. Ya kebaka kamese laungati o mena bulo November, asambandu anakanrendre ketundo sotava.
Many like Chuta have yet to understand what biodiversity is all about. To them, it's as simple as their surroundings and every living thing in them. In coastal areas like Mali and Kia Islands off the coasts of Vanuatu in the north of the country, people depend on the sea to provide food and sustain their livelihoods. The sea is their biodiversity. But they feel that marine resources are affected because of man-made activities like logging, waste disposals in seas surrounding them, and in fish poaching. In an effort to protect the marine ecosystem, people on Kia and Mali have set up marine protected areas where traditional fishing grounds are off limits. In a little over 3 years, catches from these areas have multiplied, with fish moving closer to shore. But there is another problem. Along the coasts of Lambasa, facing the fringes of the Great Sea Reef, are commercial farms, industries and urban activities. Chemicals, human waste and untreated byproducts are pumped into the sea. Siltation of near-shore environment caused by erosion and upland activities, especially at the timber factory nearby, is a problem. Discharges from facilities in this northern town are endangering marine life. Biodiversity gives us clean water, breathable air, food, medicine, energy and more. We cannot survive without biodiversity. But there's a problem. We are already using more natural resources than the earth has in store. Because of this, the life support system is starting to break down. Loss of biodiversity, whether they're in the sea or on land, isn't the only environmental problem confronting the nation. Another environment problem is the unsustainable land use currently practiced in some agricultural and forest areas. This causes land degradation.
Land is a finite resource. Okay? There's only so much we have, and however, one thing that keeps on growing is the population. And then you add that to the complex land tenure system. Okay, though you might belong to a community in a village and you say that's our Matangali land, but if you go and take half of it and do commercial farming, it's another story.
Land degradation can be caused by natural events such as droughts, floods, overtilling and overgrazing, deforestation and poor irrigation. Fiji's Ministry of Agriculture has introduced the Sustainable Land Management Program, SLM, to address land degradation, Fiji's equivalent to desertification. Most of the major towns in Fiji are developed on river deltas and estuaries. This exposes them to intense climatic conditions and further aggravated by the destructive land use activities occurring upstream. Poor land use is a real concern, and the challenge is in the cooperation between all stakeholders.
It's highly sectoralized. I mean, each sector does its own planning, not an integrated one.
In Tilivilevu and neighbouring settlements, slope farming under SLM has been embraced.
Mami nalongani ngona leka tu sampai tu kinango kitu sangge bakila ni tundu tandu tungiliu nangona ngo sia kitu sabam napona kitu sael chu kiniliu ni kwa kitu satu sotale na sonna natoso sotale begi ba merato satu saraniliu.
In Lambasa, government officials are planning infrastructure that will sustain floodwaters next time it rains heavily in the north.
So the dam is about 1 kilometer.
A proposal to build a dam has been put forward. Now surveys and engineering assessments are being carried out. This is the Korotari River in the north of the country. The upper reach flows quietly until heavy rain pelts the hills and mountains, causing a roaring gush downstream. When this happens, the lower stretch, including Lambasa town, can be covered in water in as little as a few hours to a few days.
This catchment area we have come up with a program. You must have heard that in 2003 there were a lot of floods around the Lambasa River. There were a lot of few lives that have gone, and there was a lot of outcry from the business community down in Lambasa, telling that there are a lot of floodwaters flowing down the river and later on flooding the township and having a lot of problems with their business.
2 dams are to be put here in Sika Sika settlement. The dams will be 2 meters in height and expanding to about 25 to 30 meters long.
It is important in many ways. It can help mitigate floods and retard the flood peak flows of the flood phenomena during heavy rains or during cyclones. The stored water can be used by the farmers to irrigate their farms the whole year through. It can be used for aquaculture also, and then it could be the dam periphery could be developed into an ecotourism park. Could help boost the income of the farmers. It could also help in maintaining balance on the river morphology downstream of the dam. Because as of now, most of the rivers here now are subjected to heavy erosion and siltation.
Frequent flash floods, drought and cyclones have become a familiar phenomenon in Fiji. While adaptation programs have been put in place, this doesn't completely protect the environment, homes, people and their livelihoods from rising sea level, seawater intrusions into agricultural farmlands and increased salination. In the eastern part of Fiji, the people of Mburetu and Cuva know too well what the changes to the climate means.
Masulaki tolei vatambu sarme waina turani bonua ke na ai taltala anke mai dagani kana songo bonua sa vatambu ina ni to wengulnguli mena numichiko mena lima se kinne mbake semani ruasongo bulusara me anga vikimami.
In Cuva, adaptation to climate change is in the form of coastal protection. Seawalls and dikes are infrastructure built to restrain the surging waves. Like many man-made structure, it's only a matter of time before natural processes break through. Mburetu, like most of the traditional villages in the Rewa Delta, is flanked by sea on both sides. Any rise in seawater level would severely affect their traditional farmlands. Recently, the people of Mburetu had to abandon this plot of land because of inundation or presence of salt water. In order for the people of Mburetu to safeguard their farmlands from inundation or movement of salt water inland, freshwater deposits like this one must remain inland. Villages like Bavu in Nandronga have seen changes to their environment. Bavu has a water management project in place with the help of the University of the South Pacific and AusAid. Life is now bearable.
Andau buam bali tungana waina pengang todo. Yena le meizan rai waluna viva torta kitaki. Me kunta kina ka holi na ngwele me siki na vaini. Ara holi na le matutungwangwa.
Yana ona la manu kutoka na rai babu. Na ndolo ni ruwayo ko chana kona kavina. E ponu ngauna dolo haranga mana roko. Ne hanana ronga la mai komea wayoke.
There are no boundaries to environmental problems. For Fiji, efforts to address them need to be escalated.
But some of the other hidden ones are, some of these conventions are quite complex. Only those who are a part of it, particularly for instance, for the UNCCD, the Ministry of Agriculture is the focal point. While the other two conventions, climate change and biodiversity, is the Department of Environment. It's only these institutions, may I even add, those who are really involved in that, in those institutions are the ones who are well versed. As soon as you move out to other department ministries who are supposed to be stakeholders, really have little knowledge of what they're supposed to be doing, their responsibility as well.
Life must go on in Tilivilevo. Like their fellow countrymen in other villages around the country, safeguarding their livelihoods requires protecting the ecosystems on which they rely for food and shelter. Tackling environmental degradation should go hand in hand with improving economic and social welfare. Improving food security and livelihoods for rural population requires combating desertification, conserving biodiversity, and reducing vulnerability to climate change.
Well, people say the buzzword is integration, integrated approach. It's easily said than done. Okay, people, departments have their own mandates, they have their own portfolios and corporate plans to achieve per year or per 6 months. So just simply saying, oh, let's all collaborate and do and approach these issues in an integrated manner, it takes a while. So it needs some political will and strategic planning and management to achieve those.
For experts in the government, addressing the capacity gaps that have been identified is a challenge.
Yes, there is urgency to, first of all, fulfill the reporting requirements that are placed on the countries, such as Fiji, in terms of reporting back to those 3 main Rio Conventions on the progress, the status of work that has been undertaken at the country level. There's also urgency to identify what is really needed to strengthen the management of environmental issues at the national level. That is one of the biggest gaps that Fiji, as well as the other countries in the Pacific, are facing right now.
As we returned from the island of Mali, the sun bade farewell. We marveled at its beauty as it gleamed on the sea and into the marine system. On the islands, its trees, animals and plants, and we were reminded of the diversity of life, our environment and our sources of living, and why there must be a concerted effort to protect them. If this means addressing the capacity gaps identified when implementing the requirements of the Rio Conventions, then not only government and partners in development, but every citizen should rise to the call.